All right, folks, so I'm going to keep this relatively brief, but I wanted to show you a little tool called Google Scholar. And Google Scholar effectively harnesses the searching capabilities of Google's algorithm and really just focuses on a subset of information that is scholarly in nature. And when we say scholarly, what we essentially mean is that it's written by experts and that it's reviewed by experts, and that's where the term peer review comes from. And in an academic context, scholarly articles from journals and those types of publications are really the gold standard. Do you have to use scholarly journal articles while you craft your proposal for this class? No, you don't. But for some of you, depending on the nature of your problem, it may be a very helpful place for you to look. And so I just want to give you sort of a tour of what Google Scholar is and what it's capable of, because I think there's some really nice features in here that could help you, maybe not only in this class, but in future classes and maybe even professionally, depending on the types of work that you plan to do. So I'm going to continue to use this sort of mock or model proposal that I'd be writing about food insecurity at community colleges. And so I'm going to try to do some research that helps me to paint a portrait of what that looks like and why it's important. And so the first thing I want to identify for you is the importance of using the right words. And so I'll give you a quick example of what that sounds and looks like. Last semester, I had a student come in to work with me in the Writing Center, and she asked for my help on an assignment, and she wanted to write about culture shock, particularly among immigrants that come to the United States. And she wanted to understand better what the causes were and what the best treatments were for culture shock. And culture shock essentially is this mental health manifestation of anxiety and depression because somebody is in a new culture and doesn't speak the language and doesn't understand the customs and sort of feels out of place. Okay? And so we sat down and we used Google Scholar and we used the library database features, and we started searching, and we just absolutely could not find anything that was worth a damn. We couldn't find anything that really helped us answer our question. And so then it occurred to me, well, maybe in the literature it's not referred to as culture shock. Maybe that's slang. And so what we did was we went to Wikipedia, believe it or not, and we found out that culture shock in the literature, in sort of scholarly vernacular, is actually called acculturation stress. And as soon as we started using that term, we started to find results. And really, it changed the nature of our research completely. Whereas we were stumped with culture shock, as soon as we started using that term, acculturation stress, we started to find stuff that immediately answered our questions and helped us write this paper. So the moral of that story is sometimes you have to, if you hit a roadblock in this type of research, you have to ask yourself, am I using the right term? Is there a preferred term in the literature? And sometimes there is and sometimes there isn't. So for instance, I want to look at food insecurity. That term may or may not work. I may have to use hunger. I may have to zoom out even more. Maybe there just hasn't been a lot of research or work done on this, and I may have to look at poverty and then look at food insecurity as a subset of poverty. So there's a number of ways to sort of get at the same thing. So don't be afraid to play around with your search terms. Don't be afraid to take a look at Wikipedia just to get a sense for what things are called and how people talk about it, because sometimes that can really help. And again, that was sort of like our guiding light when I was helping this woman with her paper. So anyway, without further ado, I am just going to go to Google Scholar, and in the same way that you would with a regular Google search, I'm going to try to type in words that are going to help me. Okay, and so I'm going to type in food insecurity, and I want to make sure that I'm getting something specific to community colleges, because frankly, for the purpose of this particular assignment, I don't really care about food insecurity in Ethiopia. That's not something I'm looking at right now. So I want to try to screen that out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use capital and. And what that is that's a Boolean operator, and it means that the two things have to be true. So in order for something to come back as true, it has to have the term food insecurity and community college, okay? And so the other thing that I want to show you is that computers are not very smart. And so what they're going to do is search for these words individually. Food, individually, insecurity individually, community individually, and college individually. Now, if I want them to be searched as phrases, I need to put them into quotation marks, and that kind of cements them as an individual term. So food and insecurity have to be side by side now, and community and college have to be side by side now. So it's not just sort of picking and choosing. It's not just those four words have to appear, it's that they now have to appear as phrases. So let's just see what happens here when I hit search. Okay, so we've got some stuff here. Food insecurity among community college students, prevalence and association with grade point average. Good Lord, that sounds helpful. Evaluation of the Energize Your Life, social marketing campaign pilot study to increase food intake among community college students. Potentially interesting. Student food insecurity, the skeleton in the university closet. Okay, so we're starting to find stuff here. Now, one of the limitations of Google Scholar that can sometimes be frustrating is that unless you see over here on the right-hand side a link to a PDF or .doc or an HTML file, you don't have access to the full text document. So, for instance, this one here looks really good. That I want to understand the relationship between food insecurity and grade point average, right? But unfortunately, it doesn't have the link. So I can click on it, and what it's going to end up doing is it's going to take me to the publisher's website, in this case, Taylor and Francis, and it's going to tell me that if I want to read this article, I'm going to have to pay $4 million. Well, I don't want to pay $4 million to read this, but what I could do, and this is completely fine, is I could read the abstract here. And for those of you who maybe aren't familiar or it's been a while, an abstract is basically a nutshell or Cliff's Notes version of the article. And I could read this and I can actually get really good information. And so let's just read it really quickly. I'm going to scan through this. Okay, they did a study. They used a particular survey to do it. The research setting was 2 community colleges in Maryland, one in a low-income urban area and one located in an affluent suburban area. So not directly relevant to KVCC. I don't see anything in here about rural, but that's okay. And it says results demonstrate that 56% of students in the overall sample were classified as food insecure. So think about that for a minute. Over half of students in this particular study were food insecure, and that students at a higher risk of food insecurity included those who reported living alone or those who reported being single parents. So you might be able to extrapolate that and look at the percentage of KVCC students who fit those demographic categories. And then, let's see, food insecure students were more likely than food secure students to report lower GPAs, so between 2 and 2.49 versus a higher GPA. And the data suggests that food insecurity is an issue for a large percentage of the community college student sample, and that it may have adverse effects on student performance. So while this isn't a direct one-to-one correspondence to KVCC, they didn't look at a rural community college in New England, it does give us something to talk about. And it could say, one study done by Maya Maroto, Anastasia Snelling, and Henry Link found that there was a correlation between food insecurity and lower GPAs. And that helps us. That shows us that there is some relationship between the problem. Okay, so that gets us somewhere. But if we go back here, this is why I love Google Scholar so much. And that is that, for one thing, if I were going to use just that abstract as in my proposal, I'd want to cite it and give credit to it. And what's beautiful about this is that for your reference page, all you have to do here in Google Scholar is click Cite, go to the APA or the MLA or the Chicago citation, copy and paste it, and dump it into your reference page. Boom, done, no questions asked. I mean, that saves you a tremendous amount of time and anxiety. And so that alone is reason enough to use Google Scholar. But the other thing that I want to point out is that you can also see other people who have cited this particular research. And this research was done in 2015, so it's relatively new. But since 2015, 19 people have used that as a foundation for their own research. So I can click on this, and I can automatically start to get another list of resources here that talk about things like food insecurity. Okay, and so we can look through these. And again, some of these are going to be helpful and some of them are not. You can actually search within those. So in those 19 sources, you might want to see if any of them talk about rural, and 11 of them do. And so you could take a look at that. So here's one: food and housing insecurity among American college students. And what you're going to find here is you're really going to find data. You're going to find information that helps you characterize the percentage of students at rural community colleges who are food insecure. Or, you're going to find information about the relationship between food insecurity, and graduation rates. Okay, and that's super important. So that alone, the ability to sort of look forward in time, so from 2015 to 2017, and to see who's talking about this, allows you to enter that conversation and to find high quality information. Okay. The other thing that's really interesting, and so this one here, evaluation of the Energize Your Life social marketing campaign pilot study to increase fruit intake among community college students, doesn't sound that relevant, but again, we can look at who is using that in their own work. And in this case, there's a full text article, so we can click on that. And we could take a look at the abstract and find out if it is relevant. So what you might learn from this is that one way to decrease food insecurity, or one way to promote healthy behavior, maybe it's healthy budgeting or healthy eating, is to have a marketing campaign. But the other beautiful part about this is that I can scroll down to the bottom here, and I can look at their references to see if there's anything in there that I think is helpful. And oftentimes there is, and what I generally do is just copy and paste the name of the author and the title, and I put it back into Google Scholar, and invariably I can find it. The other thing that I want to point out to you is that sometimes we're just limiting our search too much, and so I'm going to do this instead, and I'm going to say food insecurity and student success. Okay, and so that's going to change the search a little bit. It's not going to necessarily be specific to community colleges, although we may find stuff about community colleges, and it's going to focus more on food insecurity and student success. So let's see how that changes things. Okay, it absolutely does. And so you could look through all of these results, and you could figure out what here is useful to you and what is not. So partnering to build a pantry, a university campus response to food insecurity. Let's take a look at that really quickly. And so again, we can scroll down, we can read the abstracts, but oftentimes what I encourage folks to do is to read the introduction and to read the conclusion. Because the introduction is going to lay out why this problem is important, and it's going to give you some really important data that allow you to characterize the nature of your problem. And so it's going to give you definitions of things like food insecurity. It's going to talk to you about the way that the rate of the cost of college has outpaced inflation tenfold. It's going to give you really important language to talk about your problem. But as I said before, the other beautiful part about this is that 3 other people have cited this, which allows me to click on this. And then I can read these other articles. So here we go, food insecurity among college students, an assessment of prevalence and solutions. That sounds like it's going to be potentially perfect. And so I'm going to click on that. It's going to take me here, and I have the opportunity, again, to read this. And then I can go to the bottom, and I can read, at some point, their works cited right here. And I'm going to be able to find out a lot about food insecurity, student success, college costs, those types of things. So Google Scholar is really powerful in that way. It allows us to I talk about research a lot of times as a spider web, and not necessarily a spider web in terms of the arachnid, but a spider web in terms of your windshield when it breaks. A lot of times all it takes is that one nick, you find that one source, and all of a sudden it spider webs out, and you found yourself in the midst of a conversation where you can really find important information. And so I would encourage you to use Google Scholar because it gives you that functionality of not only looking backwards by looking at an article's works cited page and not only finding high quality peer-reviewed information, but it also gives you that ability to look forward to see who's using it in the meantime, and it allows you to really quickly click that cite button. And so if I spent another 30 minutes in here playing around with food insecurity or hunger or poverty and student success and food insecurity and grade point average, food insecurity and graduation rates, I'd slowly start to accrue some really important information that would then allow me to talk confidently, credibly, and persuasively about the problem that I'm trying to characterize. And so that's Google Scholar in a nutshell. I use it all the time, and not just for academic issues. A lot of times I use it to find information, just data. I just need to know what percentage of people do X or how many people do Y. And so it can be a really great place to get that type of information, because the reality of the situation is we don't necessarily see it at KVCC, but at major universities, that have virtually every academic program you can imagine, folks are, examining the economics, the business, the psychology, the sociology of just about everything. So if you have a question that could be answered empirically, there's a good chance you can find the answer. So that should help you not only for this particular assignment, but for future assignments. So thank you for your time in watching this, and I hope that you found it was beneficial.